Mumble Mumble. All right, well, good afternoon. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for, basically, it's an afternoon of a little steampunk. Mystical arcane. I believe the theme was mystical creatures and heroes that hunt them. That was our theme in our collection we brought out for you today. My name is Paul Martell. I go by many other names. Mostly my persona for steampunk is Baron Kharza. He's got a history and everything, but I've since changed because, as my friends have said out numerous times, I have multitudes of characters and personalities that go with each of them. So Kharza has gone to what's called, my group is called Kharza's Creeps. And so basically I field all my different characters. I am one individual who fields multiple different characters. Different costumes, different outfits, different creations, and different personalities. So today I'll be doing the personality of Manfred Hartnagel, and he is the curator for the Baron's collection of the mystical and the arcane. So the Baron insisted that I come to ensure that any of the collection is not tampered with, and for your all safety, as you can lose your souls. So, but it's just a minor thing. It's a minor thing. Don't worry about it. These are my colleagues.
John Floyd. I also go by Gentleman Robot. It's my main character. To his, Kharza's, mine is Gentleman Robot. I have other characters that we'll talk about here as well, and personas that I do also for Steampunk.
Well, that was short. Dressed like this, it's Dr. Thaddeus Phul. That's P-H-U-L, because Thaddeus is no fool. But mundanely, when I actually have to go earn a living, it's Peter Valentine. By day, or by weekday, I'm a software developer for the U.S. military. But in the evenings on the weekends, I'm whatever the heck I want to be. What I want to be today is Dr. Thaddeus Phul. So, I guess historically the character is a gentleman inventor from the Arizona territories, a contemporary of Mr. Tesla. And I like to build things that light up, if you can't tell. And so a lot of the stuff that I do within steampunk needs to be, for myself, my art needs to be functional. It needs to do things. It needs to be interactive. And so we'll be showing you some of that stuff today.
Jeff McDaniel. This character is Artemis Placebo. And, his bent on reality is dealing in snake oils and remedies from around the world. Normal life, I am an assistant administrator, work for the city of Sierra Vista, and all this is just hobbies. I do that to pay for my hobbies.
That's what we all do.
Yes.
So I guess we'll, do we want to talk just basic steampunk to start with?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. So a lot of you here are either know what steampunk is because you're here for it, or you want to know what steampunk is, or you have no idea what steampunk is and thought, why are these guys talking to us? So steampunk is, I mean, there's a lot of genres. There's a lot of avenues. It can go from, basically people will say it's the 1880s. That's where it basically started out. Was it 1980s, basically, when it kind of kicked off? And became,
Yeah, it was kind of a descendant of something called cyberpunk at the time. If
Yeah.
you're familiar with cyberpunk. So the steampunk name came from cyberpunk, where cyberpunk is dystopian science fiction future, right? Steampunk was a cast back to the past, right? To the Victorian times, right? What do they like to say? Steampunk is Gothics that just have discovered brown, right?
and they basically focus on where in reality we discovered electricity and went that way. But in the steampunk world, they stay with clockwork gears and steam power and all kinds of different methods of powering things, mystical, arcane. There's a lot of people that say, well, steampunk is this, steampunk is that. Nobody should ever be able to tell you to you what your steampunk is. That's not the way this works, you know? So one of the things I love about steampunk is that most people who do it never downplay anybody else's version of steampunk. You can do as much as you want or as little as you want. We have been known to show up in pretty much just hats and that's it, you know, and then have a good time like that.
Another good way to explain it is Victorian science fiction. So you can look at the authors of the time, like H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, and later with Lovecraft.
I used to say, it's what if Jules Verne got it right? Right? His vision of the future, what if he got it right? Right? We're shooting ourselves to the moon on, you know, big bullets out of cannons instead of, you know, SpaceX. Which is still very, very cool.
So that's pretty much what steampunk is. And each of us have steampunk means something different to ours.
Right. It means something different, and we all came to it in different ways. I mean, if you're familiar with the Society for Creative Anachronism, the medieval recreation guys, I've been doing that for like 35 years, right, teaching swordplay. But the problem with it is that particular group slowly kind of evolved, you know, like most groups do over time, and there are a large number of people that are very draconian about what is and is not period. And I wanted to express myself in more creative ways than just what was period. So steampunk was a great outlet for me to go play around with all those weird science fiction things that I had in the back of my head.
Mine was a little closer to the time frame. I was a Civil War reenactor, an artilleryman, so I had cannons, guns, uniforms, and all that. And I decided that, you know, and again, you can't wear certain things. You can't have a certain apple in your hand because that didn't occur at the Battle of such and such. I'm eating my red, delicious apple, partner. Leave me alone, you know. But then there was the other end of the spectrum that I could understand what they meant. You don't want to be out there with your Slurpee cup, you know, in your uniform, not representing your what you're doing in the Civil War. So, but I started to do that, and that's when I kind of learned about steampunk, and I was like, could I take Civil War into steampunk? Yes, I could, because really in the time frame of 1880s, it's only roughly 20 years in the past. So if you were considered yourself to be a young man fighting on either the Union or the Confederacy, you'd only be in your 30s or 40s when steampunk come into play. So it's anything you want it to be. There was a show that we've all watched called Steampunked. It was a game show kind of thing where they competed against each other. We know most of those people. We know them, not like, oh, I've seen them on TV. No, we've been to conventions with them and we know where they started out. The judge, Thomas Williford, is a friend of John. John has known Thomas Williford for years. Pete, Cato, and we Cato and Talus. We've met them all, the conventions, and they're really down-to-earth people, which is really great. They didn't have the stardom that they did when we first met them. So, but that brought it into the mainstream, and each week they would present something different, which different aspects of steampunk. There was an apocalypse, there was airship, there was submarine, different things that didn't occur in reality, never really occurred. So, but one of the things that I like to do is some of my displays and things like that are arcane, the mystical. Cthulhu is one of the things I really got myself into, and it's based off of an author, H.P. Lovecraft. So, and he wrote the original books, and people just snatched them up from there, and it's just gone hog wild.
Drove them insane.
Yeah, it's all based on. They say, well, oh, Cthulhu's gonna take your soul. No, he takes your sanity. Which for most of us is pretty much gone anyway. So
It helps to start.
Yes.
exactly. So what you see is a collection of the things that we have created or collected over the years. Most of the stuff that I have personally here has some sort of, I have a hand in it. I may have gotten a piece of art or whatever, but then I have twisted it and turned it into something that made it my own. Rarely do I leave anything untouched. If I do, it's because the person who did it did a masterpiece. So, and as most of them will tell you, these are different items and they're all near and dear to us. And one thing we all as steampunks and makers love to do is talk about them.
Incessantly.
Incessantly,
Yeah,
yes.
suck all the oxygen out.
So,
Which I will open it up to questions later.
Yes, and I
Think
don't-
about all your questions now.
absolutely. We'll be here for the full 3 hours. We're not gonna sit up here and bore you with, talking and then you guys trying to listen and, get bored or whatever like that. But we will do hands-on demonstrations. You can look at our stuff. We will answer questions for you. We will assist you in any way we can if you're interested in getting into the steampunk world, or just what we do as makers and things like that. So, is there any questions that you all have right now?
Anything burning on your chest right now?
That
If so, put it out.
Yes, sir.
What's a good project for someone who wants to start in steampunk to start with?
You can start off with, yeah, exactly.
No.
Go buy all the stuff. No, I mean, most of us, or at least I'll just talk for myself. I went to Phoenix Comic-Con in 2010 and wandered around wearing much of what you guys were wearing, t-shirt, blue jeans, whatever, walked around, didn't even know what cosplay was. And I actually went to the Star Wars, the 501st folks, which are very close to the Civil War reenactments and SCA. They are very concise and precise on what it has to be and how it has to be. When I got back, I was ready to do a Mandalorian outfit and chomping at the bit to do it.
Anybody here not know what a Mandalorian is? Raise your hand.
Boba Fett
From Star Wars. Heavily armored guy.
I was ready to do anything from Star Wars. I went down the whole genre and back up again, trying to figure out a costume that I could do and what I wanted to do, but didn't know how to sew, didn't know how to do any of the plastic work, metal work, any of that stuff. But in short, I ended up stopping by a booth for which we're all involved in right now is Wild Wild West Con, which comes up in March every year at old Tucson Studios in Tucson. But I remember one of their cards. I looked up, tried to find out what steampunk was, found out what it was, started searching steampunk, and Pinterest is evil, and went down many rabbit holes. But long and short of it is to answer your question even longer, is that I ended up going down to Goodwill and found a Nerf gun, because a lot of people do Nerf guns, and repaint them and put, gold paint, brass paint, black paint, whatever, and take those fluorescent colors that they come in and repainting it into something else. And then I went from there and just started making other odds and ends that I could carry. I was adamant to not create a character. I don't know why, but these guys were all like, you have to have a character. Who do you want to be? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I just want to be me. And turned out I ended up making my own character for something that not a lot of people do, which is like an airship smuggler, because airships are pretty prominent in steampunk as well. But that's how I started off, making that, and just kind of grew from there until my skills kind of changed, here and there. And I realized that a lot of the same things that people were doing for other projects, like the Mandalorians or the Stormtroopers or the SCA or for whatever, like leather work. I went to his house, watched him do some leather, and a few years later, I'm making my own stuff out of leather. It's a little bit scarier, the leather is, because you mess it up and it's expensive, as opposed to some of the other stuff I worked with previously, but worked my way through it. But I realized that I could take a piece of PVC and paint it and make it look like a gun barrel, or make it look like a cane and use other parts, and which is how I met Paul at an event that we put together with some other friends. And he liked a lot of the stuff that we had all done, and we started talking, and next thing you know, one thing turns into another. Go to another convention later on, meet Jocelyn, which is like my sister from another mother, which met two other friends, and it just kept going from there. And I mean, basically right now I've known most of them only for between 4 to 6 years, but it seems like I've known them all my life. See, it's even longer.
It's funny because I had seen
It happens with age.
Yes.
when he started out in one of his first costumes. I saw him at a Tucson Comic Con when it was very small, And I happened to see him over in the corner, and I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting outfit or whatever. Never really paying much attention to it, did a little research, found out that it was kind of steampunk, and then they put on an event in Bisbee called the Aether Horror Fair, and I showed up, and that's where I met them, and I was like, but I didn't recognize him, because he looks different when you're in your personas and your characters. And then, again, Tucson Convention Center, another Comic-Con, we ran into each other, and then, oh, you live in Sierra Vista, I live in Sierra Vista. We started talking, I went to Pete's house, I learned some stuff from Pete. He's a resin master. I had some items, I said, can you cast this? And he goes, can I keep the cast? Absolutely. You know? I have a gladiator's helmet, and it had a Medusa on the front, and he's like, I would like to cast that. Take it, it's yours, cast it. I wanted to change it, and this is how we met, and pretty much through Steampunk, we've all become friends and acquaintances and sisters and brothers to each other. So that's one of the things I love about this genre, is that it's more than just, I mean, we're all dysfunctional, but we put the fun in dysfunctional. You know, we pretty much can count on each other. If an event, if one of our cars broke down, John and I, we were one of the last ones out of the Wild Wild West Con one day, and the people that were towing a big, what are they, Bavardo?
Yeah, the barn.
Came unhitched, hit the ground. They were, I mean, they were in a spot. Luckily, we hadn't left yet. We pulled over there, and they were good friends of ours. They owned a shop in Sweet Midnight in Bisbee for a while, and we helped them out. And for that, you know, there was no, it was just, that's how the family works. You know, we just looked after one another, and we got them back on the road, and off we went. So.
My turn? What were we talking about?
Oh yeah, second timers.
So, you know, and their stories are a little bit different, because they kind of came to the notion, or at least John came to the notion of doing this crafting kind of later in life. Whereas I've been a maker since long before there was a word called maker. You know, I've been doing this since teens, and not this specifically, because there was no such thing as steampunk, but I love hobbies. In fact, if I don't collect 2 or 3 hobbies a year, there's something wrong, and you can pretty much assume that. So, you know, I've been doing making for a very, very, very long time. What was intriguing was, I've mentioned before, that the SCA, you were limited to period materials and period sources, so things like leather and wood and other things. And I've got a long history in that, but recently, about 5-6 years ago, I started playing around with electronics. You know, I am a software developer, but I started playing around with hobbyist electronics and building your own electronical, you know, your own circuit boards and your own kind of devices. And that's really tripped for me, because I've been making static art for a very long time. What really works for me now is this idea that I can put behavior in my objects, right? I can use the latest in technology to make something that looks old actually have really high tech. And I love that dichotomy of, it looks like it's an ancient Egyptian relic, but buried inside of it is a Wi-Fi hotspot, and you know, I can control it remotely and turn the lights on and make it vibrate. You know, so it's, for me, that's really kind of I love that juxtaposition of 2 very extreme things, using very old school techniques to build parts of a thing, and then use the latest in technology and fuse the 2 together. So that's really the reward for me, is to build things that have their own animus or life inside them.
I've been building stuff for a long time. When my kids were little, I had action figures. I built play structures for that, and it turned into a whole game and different construction sets just for them to play with. Just, you know, I never did anything, but, you know, let them play with them. And then I got into a Renaissance fair, and I wanted a dagger, so I was like, okay, let's get an air compressor and some briquettes and build a forge.
Because why not?
Didn't have an anvil, so I took a 25-pound plate, dumbbell plate. It didn't have any something. It was flat, smooth, and just used that as my anvil and made my own dagger, and just kept going from there. But well, like all these guys, once we got into this, it really opened it up. You know, like in Renaissance Fair, it's pretty narrow. Now they're more fantasy fairs, so it's broader, but steampunk is just
Whatever you can bring to the table.
So, and back to your question, the Nerf gun, that would definitely be my recommendation too, because you can get them super cheap at Goodwill. The next thing that a lot of people do is a backpack. And so the backpack I built it way too heavy. Because I used a real antique fire extinguisher and a real oak box that used to be in a library for index cards, and a real army backpack frame. But then to add some electronics to it, I found these little, well, you'll see them later in the piece, those plasma balls that look like they're reaching out and touching it. So I found one of those that works on USB. So I mounted that in there, because the function of the backpack was supposed to be a power pack. And that had a EL wire that came down, hooked into my glove, and then it was a shock gauntlet. But instead of actually shocking, it was a old-fashioned hand buzzer. You know, the kind of one that wind up. So it was shocking, but not electrically shocking. Just started like, I'm so
Yeah, he got all of us. Because he had to test it out, and we're all stupid. Going, hey, that's cool. Does it really work? Oh, no. Yeah, it worked. Thank you.
Yeah, I had one lady want to slap me. She wasn't expecting that. So yeah, backpack is a good start. You don't do it heavy like I did.
The same thing goes for clothing as well. I mean, take a trip down to 4th Avenue. What's it called again?
Tucson Thrift in 4th Avenue.
Right, and they're fabulous too. I mean, I picked up this jacket here. If you already sew, that's great. His significant others have, they all sew. He sews, I don't. I've tried. I've done a couple of things here and there, but
we buy.
yes, we buy.
We can seamstresses and go, we pay you, make things
Yes.
for us.
And Tombstone's a great source for that.
Yeah, Tombstone as well.
Tombstone is all fantastic.
Yes,
Disney's great for old clothes. Go to the antique stores. Works great.
Tombstone starts out with the 1880s because that's what it's all based off of. So if you want really good Western character, which many of us have, different Western characters, that's where you go. Spur Western wear.
If you know what you want,
You know what you
but
want.
you can't make it and you can't find it, you go see those two ladies right there. Which is what we've done.
Yeah.
But that, that does bring up a good point, though. There is a difference between the makers in terms of style, right?
Yep.
So there's kind of a spectrum, and so that you have people, and you mentioned Nerf guns, right? There's a lot of people that will start and they'll buy a thing that is reasonably modern, and then they will modify it until it looks like something steampunk.
Right.
Then there's the other side of the spectrum that'll go, there's a block of wood and some screws, and I'm gonna build it from scratch, right? And so we each come to it from different perspectives. I've been learning lately to buy a thing and modify it. That's my new adventure.
That's the irony.
I tend to start at scratch, and you'll see
that's
that
the
from
irony
the
is that he used to be, I'm gonna start from scratch.
Yes.
I started with something else. Now he's starting to dabble in there because of other reasons, but he has other skills now that it's easier to draw this in and work from it from there. So we've kind of both come full circle because now I've done the opposite too, is I take a tube and turn it into a gun, which is similar to what he's done back here with some things, or that harpoon gun back there. So we've at least the two of us, we work together, and we've kind of come full circle, both of us. So, but
For the most part, I think the answer would be, for most people, it's a gun.
yep.
That's what you start out with. Is a
Right.
gun.
It just kind of varies
Or-
on what you start.
Exactly.
Almost everybody here is wearing some sort of hat.
Yep.
Right.
Or if you want to make a hat. So you got to start out with a hat. You know?
That was my first gun. And that's a from scratch build. So, but you're right, you do kind of start with a gun. It's just,
So, and some of the guns that I start with are actually Nerf guns. They're sitting over there. And if you know anything about Nerf guns, you'll look at it, you'll kind of see the components, and you're like, that's a Nerf gun? Oh yeah, because if you take a Nerf gun apart, because they'll never go back together. No.
oh no, it comes back together, you just end up with extra parts.
They tell me you could take a Nerf gun apart and change the springs out and make it shoot further. Yeah, that never worked. So I had plenty of guns taken apart.
Yeah.
Because we had Nerf wars, you know,
Yeah.
you get together and have Nerf wars. I had plenty of Nerf guns, and I'm like, hey, I can make this. And then I saw one of the episodes where the Maverick, which was the sidearm of choice that everybody carried, everybody had a Maverick. So I said, I don't want the same gun that everybody else carries. And I belong to an organization on Facebook. That's a good place. You can meet people on Facebook, called the Steampunk Gun Challenge. And they were called the Last Maverick Challenge. So I took the Maverick apart and I gutted it and I made the Maverick that's sitting over there. It's just a pistol. The Maverick was I can show you the basics of it. It's a Nerf pistol. This is the basics of it. And it has a 6-cylinder barrel here. And you cock it back and forth and it shoots out little Nerf darts. Okay? From here forward, that's all gone. Most of the stuff sitting on the outside of it was what was in here forward. I gutted the whole thing. I didn't want it to look like everybody else's Nerf gun. I didn't want it to look like everybody else's Maverick. So what I did want it to look like was some sort of Martian death ray that you see in most of the old cheesy sci-fi. So when I put this together, it sat on my shelf for 6 months. All the different components laying there. Nothing would come to me, nothing at all. And then one day, I don't know what it was, I think maybe something hit me in the head, or it was cold, I don't know. But it clicked in my head and I started to just piece things together. So within inside of 2 or 3 days, everything was built. And then another week to get it all painted. So I entered it and won 2nd place. So the guy who beat me out, I still say cry foul because it didn't look like a nerd. It didn't look like, I don't even think he started with a Maverick. Anyway, but that's how he started out with. It's just it's a Nerf gun, which is a pistol. And my painting skills come from way back, much like Pete, I was a kid. I used to paint miniatures. I don't know if you've ever seen like Dungeons and Dragons. It was a great way to start out with miniatures. And I started, God help me, I got into a tabletop wargaming. And you had to buy hundreds of miniatures. And then someone said, well, you have to make terrain. Well, I'm the kind of person who likes to make my terrain look right. And it's got to look kind of correct. So then I started to learn. And this is like the culmination of my painting abilities now. It's like, what did I tell you, 2 weeks? 2 weeks to build and paint and everything else, and bam, it's done. So, but that's not something I did overnight. And you won't do it overnight starting out.
Oh, maybe you will.
Maybe. You might be a
prodigy.
Yeah.
You might be a prodigy, which I've seen it before. People just grab the stuff, they put it together and go, what does this look like? Does it look good? I'm like, I hate you. You did that in how long?
Because there's a lot of sites out there, and that's where I guess a good place to go to is that to go on to what you had asked is that there's sites out there that they might tell you how to build. You know, I'll keep using Star Wars because everybody knows what that is, but they tell you how to do a Star Wars Stormtrooper outfit. You can take that and turn that into making something else and just put it in and make it steampunk or make it whatever. I mean, a lot of people are now mashing up where they'll take one genre and they'll make another. So there'll be a Batman Stormtrooper, you know, or they've mixed up and we've all seen and we have friends that have done mashups of actual, you know, Gaslight Batman, and the whole DC genre. I mean, every character
Disney.
you think of.
The Disney princesses gone steampunk. That's
Jeff
magnificent.
did a steampunk Doctor Strange not too long ago.
He did a steampunk Odin.
Odin, right?
His wife. Man, that was fantastic. His
But I
spear,
mean,
he literally pulled his spear out, and it was a little compacted looking thing, and I was like, what are you gonna do with that? And he's like, whoosh, and out come, bam, and it's a spear. I was like, well, hello.
I mean, you can go online and just type in whatever you want to make, and there's so many I mean, it's grown even since we've all started, from not only when they were kids, but now with everything that's out there. I mean, anything you want to make between YouTube or whatever, you type it in. I was just telling him on the ride over here, I've been in the background, I'll put on Adam Savage, now has a show called One Day Builds or Adam Savage's Garage, and I put those on the background and I have to stop and go back. So I'm putting it on as background
Does
noise
everybody know who Adam Savage is?
from
Mythbusters?
Mythbusters.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Oh, he's not the bald one. So, what I
The one that
mean,
kind of looks like him.
Oh, okay.
but I mean, you can watch those shows, and again, he's making a sword, and he's making it, just telling him he made it for the Camelot movie that was coming up, so he could carry it around at the San Diego Comic-Con. And he had that sword, but they wouldn't let him carry that one, so he decided to make a replica of that one, so that he could carry it around and on the floor. And did an amazing job. You can take that same thing and use the same ideas that he made, and find even a pattern that you want from somebody else, watch his and figure out how to paint it, how to make it, different tips, and then that'll open up a whole new world, which again, all roads lead back to Pinterest, which is, like I was laughing at earlier, but yes, it's a nightmare. Because then you end up with 12 other projects.
Go to Google, type in steampunk,
Yep.
Right.
and then
And hit images.
sit back. Because you'll get so much, you're gonna be overwhelmed or whatever, but in some cases, there's funny because you punch like steampunk robot. Guess what I found? His character. Gentleman Robot was there. I was like, that's pretty cool. You know? So, but that's anything you want to start out with. Hats are a good thing. Guns are a good thing. And they don't have to have a gun. You can have a cane. He's made amazing canes. That's one of the big things. The gentlemen at the time always carried a cane, whether they needed it or not. It was just something that they did. They wore hats. Top hats, bowlers, these type of hats, anything you want, whatever you're comfortable with. It's like, and then people want to get like, well, that's not what I really wanted, or it's not that's how you start out. You start out slowly and you build up from there. I didn't want to start out and have a closet that got its own space because all my steampunk stuff's in there. And neither did my wife. But
Have to build on to your property.
yes,
Build a whole other
yes,
building
you have to build on
Yes.
a giant barn to put in everything that you've created over the
Some
years.
have started with that, but
Yeah.
others steampunk drove you there. So, since we are in a gallery, I think it's probably appropriate to also talk about the art itself and what inspires us, right? In terms of where do we draw some of our ideas from? Because a lot of steampunks wear, to a large degree, steampunk is one of those things where you wear your art, right? You end up putting something together that you put on, mask that you put on, a hat that you put on, clothing that you've made, right? So a lot of it's wearable, some of it isn't. But a very large amount of it is because you go to these events, and so it's a lot of wearable art. But for me, I tend to draw from a rich background of science fiction and fantasy literature. I'm an avid reader, and so I tend to draw from the things that I really like.
Yeah,
And
who do
visually,
you
from
read?
like movie media, right?
Like you like to read? Like you read? Okay. It's a good thing. Who likes to watch movies? Oh yeah. Who spends all their time on the internet? Oh yeah.
So you can kind of look at any project as being, something drives you there, right? The tiki was simple. They had an event coming up at Gaslight Gathering, which was in San Diego.
Expo.
Gaslight Expo, sorry.
In San Diego.
In San Diego. And the theme of the event was tiki. So I had to make a tiki I could wear, right? So your inspiration comes from a variety of sources. But in this particular case, that was oh my God, it's 3 months away, I gotta make something. And that was every weekend for like a month and a half spent building it. Yes, sir.
How did you wear it? How did you see it?
So how did I see? So there's a trick. If you look at the front of it, see that little black dot? That's a camera. There's a liquid crystal screen on the inside, and so right in front of my face I have the screen so I can walk around. We'll take it down here after a bit and we'll actually turn it on and play with it.
Because he came
Since I
to
said
me-
most of my stuff is interactive, right? There's switches and levers and stuff to play with.
He came to me because one of the largest builds that I did after 3 years, about 3 years of doing steampunk, I finally decided I was going to build a large diving bell based on a model that a gentleman did, and Pete turned to me and he's like, so where did you look out of? What did you do? And I told him, I said, make sure you do this and this and this and this. Make sure you put some sort of fan, or if you're gonna have it open, because when I
And I
did,
pretty much ignored everything you told me.
yes, but he did have a big gaping open hole in the top, so there is no air needed. But he did change things up and actually put a camera in so we could see. I tried to make mine more like so that it was almost very close to the actual model. I changed a few things up to make them different. But
What he's not telling you is, that's not the build where he really had the camera.
Yeah.
He had a great big giant wolf.
oh yeah,
Four-legged giant wolf that he could not see out of except for a camera.
Or for
And it
most part,
was a
movement.
backup camera.
everything's reversed.
Everything's reversed.
And I didn't realize until the night before.
So those of us,
Turn right. No, your other way.
Because you'd be surprised is when you look at something and they're walking to the right and you're trying to follow them to the right and you realize they disappear off the camera and you're like, where'd you go? They're like, we're over here. Because everything is now reversed. So luckily he knows now how to switch that. I still have mine. So luckily I'll be able to switch that one day.
so I
But
tell you these things because I've had the dubious honor on numerous occasions of acting as Mr. Floyd's handler.
yes.
If you plan to build big suits that you can't see or are very mobile out of, you need handlers. So, or fit in elevators.
Yes.
So
Those are always nice.
they're fun and it's and I love what I love best about working with him is when people would turn and they would see him. See, he can't see the reactions. Most of the time he's stuck in there, he's only seeing a small thing. But I would see the, and I'd be like, oh my God, this is so great. People would just turn around, little kids would be like, and just to see that look, and the inspiration and the light in that kid's, or even adults' eyes. We were walking across Wild Wild West Con in Old Tucson, and they let this big show out of the saloon. And as they filtered out, he was standing there trying to get over to take pictures with Guy Ashley. And I'm trying to move him along. And they floated out and stood in front of him and just stared. And I was like, we're going nowhere now. So, but that's the magnitude of the things that he builds and what he elicits when he creates his art. And all of them don't. The Tiki was the belle of the ball, in my opinion, and his wife, and the daughter. Oh my God, everything was magnificent. I stood there.
My honey is usually the one who does the big builds, right? And so, like, she needed some dragon wings, but we had already established go big or go home. So she has 14-foot wingspan dragon wings that she takes out to a con. The only problem with that is that it's like, I want a picture. Open the wings, sure. And decapitates a small child. So you have no idea how many bodies I've had to hide for that.
It's all on camera now.
It's live too,
So yeah, and I've worked. One of the first characters I did was an automaton called the Clanker, and I have a big backpack like they did. I built mine out of foam because I saw their backpacks, and I went no, no. So I built the backpack out of foam, but it was sturdy enough off of a plastic frame. But when I turned, again, I could not see the small child that was parked right there. So when I whipped around like this to get a photo, I shot that kid like 10 feet. And I was like, what was that, you know? So staying in the persona of the character, who doesn't care about humans, I just marched on. They were like, hey sir, pardon me, and I just turned and looked. And they were like, never mind. Had this giant skull face and goggles and a black helmet, black shoulder pads, long armored coat and everything, and they were just like, nope, never mind, don't want to mess with this guy. So, and again, it was never done intentionally. We never want to hurt anybody that we're near. Mom has speared his wife numerous times on different articles. He likes to put big spikes on things, and he turns around and goes, hey, did you see that? And we're like, he did a
Wife threatened
movie.
me and said, do not put your arm out
Yes.
of your waist for the rest of the con. Yes.
He did a movie with Thomas Williford, and one of the scenes is he throws me a drill, and it's a real drill. It turns and everything, and I'm like, I'm not expecting this. So as I'm backing out of the shot, I'm like, it's stuck in me. For real. So these are things that, and they're funny stories, and they're even funny at the time, because I was laughing because I tell him, and then he can't hear me. So he laughs afterwards, and we just get a big kick out of it. But that's, he was so tall in one event in Salt Lake City that he almost sheared off the fire sprinkler heads down the hallway. So I'm directing him as he keeps everything. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Keeping us from getting thrown out of the hotel."
Mind you, I'm on 10-inch stilts.
Yeah,
Every
he's-
time he's pushing me, I'm going.
He's like 9 feet tall, so like, and I have a very short fuse, so I tell people move out of the way, and they're like standing there. I'm like, "I'm sorry," I said, "Move out of the way," because he's just stomping along.
So clearly, we're not being invited again.
No, we weren't invited back to that.
We're not actually. I think it ended.
Yeah, I think it
We
is.
were at the inaugural end.
So do we want to cover, like, I know there's a number of, like, we've got some props and that kind of thing that have some activity behind it that might be interesting to folks to see working, right? And maybe talk about design and construction techniques and some of the things. Would seem reasonable?
We did a parade in Tucson with the Tucson Steampunk Society, and the theme they picked was the latest Harry Potter and we're fine. And so, well, I've got to make a suitcase that something pops out. So, looked at some different things on YouTube, and ended up going with a PVC, spring-loaded PVC. So when it's down in this setting, the spring is stretched. So when I pull the spring, so when it's long, the spring is at the rest position, and then when it's short, the spring is stretched. So we have to cut slits in the side. And it's kind of wide. So that
Like any good demo, things go wrong.
So the other thing I tried to do here, it doesn't work too well, but magicians use mirrors to look like you're seeing through something, but it's really on. So this is just reflective paper from Hobby Lobby, covering up the PVC pipe, because the PVC pipe goes from here to about here. In the short.
If you don't know what's coming, it's a good jump scare.
So there you can see, you have to cut the slit so that the spring has a place to pin goes through, so the spring can slide between the two PVC pipes.
Yeah, people at Hobby Lobby, mostly at Home Depot, don't like me. Ace Hardware especially. I know I've told the story to a lot of people already heard this, but the gentleman named Bob that works there, he's really big into model trains. So if you know anything about or want to know anything about model trains, he'll tell you and talk to you all day long. But if I go in and tell him, "Hey, I'm making this and this," and he goes, "Is this for one of your projects?" I get, "Yes, sir." He takes me to one of the younger guys. I tell him I'm in there to find this piece for my plumbing and for this, actual home repair. Then he's like, "Come with me." He's more than glad to help me, but when it comes to imagination for building something, those things that we do,
I just find error.
yeah, exactly. And I even had the guy from Home Depot stop talking to the customer he was helping because I had a toilet flange that I was going to put over my arm that became the basis because I could fit my hand through it, but I mounted things to the outside of it so stuff could spin around it. But I had the toilet flange, I'm holding it, but I had a piece of the dryer vent that bends around and moves. And I had it on there, and I'm looking at it, I'm showing my daughter, and he stopped talking and came over and asked me, he goes, that doesn't go there. So I'm making an art project, and he goes, okay, and he walked away, and then I added something else to it, and he came over and he goes, is that for plumbing in Bisbee? Because it's really not to code. And I said, it's for an art project. So, but he would not, he totally stopped helping the other customer and came over to tell me that. So, but you know now who to go to.
floor people in haste and got rude because I never take them up when they come over and ask if I want help.
Because I know what the answer is going to be. I can say, yeah, I need this and this and this.
What are you building?
What part in your house does this go to? It doesn't.
I'm building a ray gun.
Yeah.
Building what? A ray gun. Like a ray gun. Like a ray gun. Yeah, let me see if I can find Aaron for you. Because Aaron's kind of really cool. He's younger. He's kind of a hip dude, and he walks in and sees me. He goes, "What are we building today?" Because he's like, "What do you got?" You know. It's like.
Well, sometimes you have embarrassing conversations you have to hold with people.
Yes.
Years ago, I was looking for material to make miniature crossbows. I was going to make miniature marshmallow shooting crossbows, and I had been on the search for months. And I was running out of things that I could use for the prods, right, for the springy part of the front. And at one point, I'm like, a wooden ruler. Let me try a wooden ruler. Carol has one in her sewing supplies. First mistake. Carol's not one. So I reach over to grab the wooden ruler, and I knock over a container of corset stays. Those are the metal stays for corsets. And I picked one up, like, perfect! Grabbed a handful of them, ran out the shop, started making crossbows. Then my honey comes home. She's like, "You're buying me replacements right now, right?" "Yes, ma'am." So I'm ordering 1,000 corset stays from a costuming company on the East Coast. And they're like, "What are you going to use them for?" I'm like, "Okay, so what I'm going to use them for is making crossbows." And I'm just like, "What? Crossbows? What part of an outfit does that go in?" Okay. So, but yeah, from a construction perspective, we make different things, right? Sometimes, well, with any luck, it's still working. There we go.
Hey.
So you might as well have a boot sound that's booting up. Right? And if you're going to have a gun, you might as well have a talking gun. Clearly, right? So as you can see, I mean, it depends on your construction techniques and what you want to do. PVC, John talked about. Well, that's a PVC black pipe, sewer pipe. It's just been covered in copper, which is actually copper flanges from Home Depot, right, that they use on rooftops. There's found parts, like a little brass telescope from India. There's not so found parts like a passive infrared sensor, so that it can actually sense movement. So it just kind of varies on what you want to do construction-wise. John talks about leather, right? You have to do some leather working. You have to do woodworking. There's brass rivets, there's rivet work, there's electronics. And so every one of our projects.
From what the tin can?
The tin can? Oh, so yeah, that's actually an old film canister for 35mm film, right? And so each go ahead.
The crystals.
Oh, and the crystals, that's true. This is eulanite crystal, what they call reading crystal, that I found at a gem show. And I took it because I only found the one that had this cool ridged look. So I cast that and made a bunch more for the top. Right? So you can see kind of there's leatherworking, there's woodworking, there's electronics, there's casting and molding. You know, so you end up integrating a whole bunch of things into it. And then when you're done, you end up with something that actually talks, changes modes, sleep generator, acoustic percussion, right? And if you're particularly crazy, so in this particular mode, now I'm moving, it needs to really normally sit stationary, but it senses heat. And so when it senses heat, it continues to get more aggravated until it finally decides to shoot. Let's see if I can anger it enough. There we go. So you can kind of play around. Your art doesn't have to be a static thing, right? It can be something that actually has interactive behavior to it, right? But your skill sets that go into this are, yes, dear. Don't worry, it'll only hurt a moment. So it just kind of varies, you know, and I was going to say there's other things like etching brass plates, right? So learning how to etch, acid etch. So you can integrate a lot of skills into your art. It isn't just something that you end up creating one thing, right? I mean, there are artists that become specialists, Most of us steampunks are not specialists. We're generalists, right? We like to learn a little bit of something and then move on and do something else cool. I guess you could call that ADD. It works for us.
Well, we're using a mixture of products as well. I mean, we're kind of going back and forth. I mean, I've kind of ventured and gone from finding things and seeing things, and I mean, my wife for the first year, just like his honey was like, you know, you're gonna put this back. I use for my boots. I found for the heels, I use Folger can. It has that little grip in the back, and it looked like an Achilles heel for a robot. So I cut him in half. I went upstairs. I only had one that we had just thrown out. Had another full one. I dumped that out into the can. Took the other one down there. They still smell like coffee to this day. I've used.
Keeps the drug dogs away.
Yes. I turned the little guinea pig houses that look like igloos that they go in and out of, little houses. I went to PetSmart and bought 2 of those because I thought they looked cool, and made them for shoulder plates because they're big and bulky pieces. Back then I thought it was easier to go find it and buy it. Now looking back, I probably would make that thing. Make it out of something else, foam or what have you. But I'm kind of coming full circle again and making other things now, except now I'm finding them and 3D printing them. He's learned how to design those things, which I am going to eventually learn on how to design what I want instead of finding them, but now I can 3D print them. And I've done that with the Kakamoras that are over here, for those that saw Moana. My daughter had a bunch of, or Vanna. I found my daughter had a Sweet 16 party and she wanted to do it, you know, like a Polynesian Caribbean thing. We went to Hobby Lobby, we bought a whole bunch of the cups, and they normally have a flower that stick them. They look like coconuts. And we stuck them in a cabinet for years. When we decided to go to the Gaslight Expo, the Polynesian, where Pete had this, we started looking around what we were going to do, and we started saying, well, we'll build Kakamoras and put them in cages, and we'll say we caught them, you know. And we had just gotten a 3D printer, so I 3D printed horns, I 3D printed little tikis on there. I 3D printed the little blue bikini top for the female version. So, and the feet, I found the feet on an actual Kakamora 3D printed, and I just went to Pete and I'm like, how do I cut these off? I don't want to 3D print the whole thing. So he showed me how to do it, cut them off, and glued them in there with some dowel rods. And now we have Kakamoras. My wife painted them. I learned that she's, you know, a better painter than I am on doing those things. So I was like, here you go. I'll build them, you paint them. I'm done. Paul's a really good painter too, so he's helped me out with a lot of things as well. So we've kind of, I think all of us have gone back and forth with what we use. I mean, that was one of the things that Paul and I drove each other to hang out and do more things together, is that I could not walk in anywhere without saying, that, I could take that and make a steampunk. It could be a bobbin. I made the end of those same boots that had the Folgers heels. I wanted to make them look metal in the front, and at the time I didn't know how to paint really well and make it look like it was metal or shape it like that. I went in and found my wife's mixing bowls, the steel ones, and cut it in half. I had to go to the store and buy a whole new set because you can't have that one bowl anymore. So now we have a full 2 sets, well, 1 full set and 1 missing one side bowl.
1 full set and parts.
Yes. But
It's whatever your eye catches. Pringles cans. You look at it's just a Pringle can. No, I see a barrel. I see anything. There are lots of different things. Coke bottles come in sometimes holiday sizes and holiday shapes, and I'm like, oh, those are perfect.
Yeah.
you can make your own goggles with toilet paper rolls or paper towel rolls. You can make your own goggles.
I had to stop going to the flea market because I was
Oh.
collecting
Oh,
more
yeah.
than I was using.
I still have tubs, Rubbermaid
Yes.
tubs full of just gadgets and gear that I swear one day I said I'm just going to bring out to one of the conventions and say, here you go, it's free, take it.
Funny you should say that, because we are having an event in February
Okay.
to clear out everyone's my stash. It's
Okay.
spot me.
Yeah, I was gonna talk to
Maybe
you
you
about
haul,
that.
Chuck.
Just because it's so wrong. We're not hoarders, we're steampunkers.
Yes.
Where to share? Yes.
Hi, my name's John and I'm a hoarder.
Hi, John.
And where is that?
It's in Tucson at the Martha Cooper Library. Yeah, and the event's on the Facebooks, which I'm sure that you can all share on your Facebook pages. These delightful people to find.
Tombstone.
Not like she's
Tucson
plugging anything.
Steampunk Society on
I'm
Facebook.
barely plugged in.
Yes, that's okay.
So, you know, you bring up 3D printers, now obviously they're, and John knows this, but he brought it up first. 3D printers are near and dear to my heart because they're the next new cool toy on the block, right? Because of what you can do with them. And look at them, they're all going on the brain. So that's actually 3D printed.
All the tentacles on this thing.
All the tentacles on that are 3D printed, right? And this is nice and robust. In fact, it's as strong as a football helmet, so you can pass that around. But that's the thing, 3D printing doesn't have to be just little boxes and little buttons and what you see a lot of people use. It can actually be real art. These designs are actually me. They start with a scan of my face on the inside, and then I build outwards, and I digitally sculpt all this, and then I print it. And it's put together in multiple parts.
How many pieces is in this?
So like that has 12 pieces that make it up. So there were 12 individual prints that had to be fused together. Right? So the Cheshire Cat,
Why? Tell them why.
that's my Krampus head.
The only reason it's a bunch of pieces is because the bed for the print is not big enough.
Right, it's 8 by 8 inches, and if you're doing something that's, 17 inches across, you gotta build it in parts. The nice thing is I use something called ABS plastic, and that melts with acetone. So one of the really cool things you can do when you print a part out of ABS, where you get 2 parts, is you literally just paint either side with acetone, press them together, and they become one. It's not a glue joint, it is fused. It is as strong as the original material once it dries, which usually takes just a few seconds. And you end up with a part that is essentially all fused together and really, really strong.
Same thing with the teeth.
Right, so literally there's 44 different 3D printed parts on this teeth alone. Right, all the little pieces, all these things here, all the teeth. So they're all designed and printed. So clearly I'm a fan of 3D printing. But it's more than that, right? So a lot of people will buy a 3D printer, and what they do is download designs off the internet and print them, right? And that's what most people use their 3D printers for, which is a crying shame because they're imagination machines, right? Anything you can imagine, they can make, clearly. And so really learning the skills to build your own 3D models means that you can make literally anything you can dream up. And so it is a new way of doing business when it comes to making. So it's go ahead.
Is it hard to use a 3D printer?
To use it is just like any other printer, right? You hit print, step back and let it do its thing.
Like making designs?
Making the designs are clearly so there are simpler programs, and in fact, one of the classes that I do at some of the conventions is to actually talk about the programs. Right? There's a handful of programs out there that are open source or open, easily downloaded, free to download. One of which is if you want to just play around, there's a beautiful program called Sculptress. So, TRIS like a female extension for sculpt, so Sculptress. If you go look for that online, it's a free download, and it's what they call digital clay. So you start with a sphere, and you literally just start pushing and pulling on that sphere with your mouse. And it starts pulling out extrusions. And in fact, these were all done using Sculptress, right? So what I did is I started by scanning my face, which I use a digital scanner to do, but you can there's apps on the phone that you can actually take a series of pictures around a person's head, submit them to a cloud server, and it sends you back a 3D model. So that's where you start. So the inside of that's a perfect match for my face. And I started with my face as the object, and I went, the nose needs to be bigger. I needed a bigger nose, right? So I inflated the nose, I inflated the eyebrows, I inflated the cheeks, I made the jaw bigger, I added teeth, right? But at the end of the day, I think was about a week worth of my playing, a few hours every night. And at the end of that week, I had my model. Then I started the printing. Now the printing, that takes some time. This, like I said, was comprised of 12 parts. They averaged about 45 hours of printing each. So as you can imagine, it took months to print
Without mess ups?
without mess ups. But I have a really good 3D printer which doesn't mess up. So, but it's one of those trade-offs, right? 3D printing, if you think about it, it's laying down fractions of a millimeter of plastic at a time, and then it goes back and does it again, and does it again, and does it again for hours and hours and hours. But what you end up with is some very, very impressive kinds of things that you can do. So, you know, the 3D printing is kind of the new way of making things. Here's another example. So, you know, I had to have a mini-me for my friend, so I made a mini-me staff. Right? And again, all the parts on that, so it's just a PVC staff, but the parts are all 3D printed.
And that's the same model, just scaled.
So that the head is just the same model scaled, and then I basically made a base for it, attached it to the base digitally, made the claws,
And back in.
replicated. So if you can see the claws are a pattern, right? So I made just one claw, and then I simply repeated the parts around and punched a hole through it so it would slide over the staff.
Take it back.
I did have to make it back. Of course, he started with the back actually. Yeah.
How long did that take you to make?
This print was about 15 hours just for the head. And then each of these is probably about 4 hours each. For the printing part, right? The designing part, I think I designed the claws in an afternoon. So maybe 3 or 4 hours of playing around with it. But that was just like pure imagination. I was just playing with shapes. Right? But so we've entered a new realm for when we talk about art, right? Because like a lot of people look at a 3D printer and like, oh, I can't tell you how many reactions I've had where I brought out one of these masks and they went, how'd you make that? Well, I you know, blah, 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 and then I 3D printed it and they were like, oh. The printer did all the work. No, actually, all the printer did was take it and realize all the work that I put into sculpting, right? So, but the advantage of it is if I want another one, press print, right? I want 10 more, I spent 10 more times. So,
Yeah, no, I know you own your own 3D printer.
I do.
You know?
2 now. It's a habit.
Well, the choice. As you know, the local library here has one available.
I don't know if the local library here has one or not. I know that some libraries have started getting 3D
The
printers.
Tucson downtown one does. The U of A library has done as well.
I'm sure this library has one, but I think they can't schedule time on it. It's just in a class.
This is zero crap.
So,
Zero craft is also.
and so there's a trade-off too. Like, so John just recently bought his own printer, and he bought his for a lot less than I bought mine. You paid how much?
320.
Which I paid about 10 times that. For my first one.
And they're coming down in price. I both him and Mark, another friend of ours that has a 3D printer, has the same one he does. That mine does pretty much. It can do the same thing that his does. I think it does. Yours does a different material than mine, other than
Right.
I do ABS and PLA. You know,
We can do other materials.
yeah. So, but they come down. They've come down a lot, which is why I was able to get one. And I dabbled, like I said, when Paul came up and had this, and I was like, hey, I got some really cool tentacles I can make you. And again, he turned them from that underneath those cool tentacles. They're blue. Because I got some extra material from our friend Mark that wasn't using that type PLA anymore, and he goes, here. And so I printed out a whole bunch of stuff, and I had already done some other smaller tentacles, but the paint job on these, I was just amazed when I saw those. I was like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. But they're cake toppers. That's all it is. And you go to this place called Thingiverse, and they have free models that people just upload their models and stuff. Like Pete can upload his models of those and put them out there for other people to download. It's a free site. You don't even have to put it on your computer or anything like that. You just download the file, and it's a zipped file, and you open that up and put it on your 3D printer, and you can size them. The size those things come in as are like this big, and I just doubled or tripled the size of them and made them that big. So,
And there's an analogy here too, because you heard me talk about before, go buy the gun versus go build the gun from scratch. John and I are in the same place in 3D modeling again now as well, right? So I'm I'm designing the stuff from scratch on my 3D printer, he's going to Thingiverse and downloading the parts. Now I'm learning to go down to Thingiverse and start with one of their parts and modify the heck out of it. And I'm teaching John how to actually use the software to build it himself.
And mash them together, because I made in the Kakamora and the cage on the left is in his hand. And it's very minimal, but in his hand he's holding a bone with a lobster claw on it. And the irony is that within about 10 minutes after he told me what to do, I was able to download a bone from a file in Thingiverse and a full-on lobster, and I brought it into Mesh Mixer. I cut off the rest of the lobster off of it and just kept the hand and stuck it together in Mesh Mixer. And it didn't have to be, because it was going to be really small. But by the time I loaded it and added it and then printed that off, I was done within an hour, and my wife was painting it, and then I glued it into his hand. So, I mean, it was that quick. I know a lot of the things like he does, he spends a lot more time on it, and that's where you learn, though. I mean, is just to get a little bit started here and there, and hopefully over time I'll be able to design better things. But
Again, it's what skill level you bring to the table. I've been doing 3D design work for many, many years. I just never had a way to get it from the computer to physical reality. Once 3D printers came along, it's like, that skill is actually useful now.
yeah, because right now the sculptress frustrates me. He's really good at it, and it frustrates. It's like it comes in and it's this ball, and you can manipulate that ball. It's like a ball of clay, and you manipulate it by using the mouse to pull it, push it, crease it, do whatever, and you can make it so it matches the other side, i.e. you're making a face, you want the face, in most cases, the other side to look exactly the same. But and thank God it has an undo button, because, one, and then next thing you know, I realize that I'm too far in.
But he brings up a brilliant point, and that's what's really cool about it, is never before in sculpting was there an undo button, right? Because if you went, crack, oh, the arm fell off. There's no undo, right? The marble just went to pieces. Whereas in 3D, you can undo it infinitely until you get exactly what you want, which is really nice.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yes.
I want you to tell us about these big characters standing here.
Okay, well, tell me, so there's one of the questions right there. What was that question?
It was more of a personal question for you guys, but I was wondering how you feel you guys have grown since being part of the steampunk community and joining it.
Grown.
Oh.
Like as a person, or even in your work, or I don't know.
Every time we put on our suits, we groan. Groan. Oh, you meant the other side.
That's what I meant, but that's okay.
Well, just knowing the community, and everybody's so friendly and inclusive and wanting to share. It's not like we're in any kind of competition. And any question you put out there, and you've got 10 people who offer up different ways to do it. So it's an amazing community as that. And the growth part is a way to express your creativity. So you just have creativity, but unless you have an assignment like going to a tiki or going to a parade, it's easier when you have an assignment or a goal, and then you say, oh, okay, I can put myself into this.
Oh, okay, so growth. So definitely growth. I started out pretty much for me. That's what it was based off of. Everything was for me. Now I create things for others. I enjoy watching people look at my art. I enjoy talking about my art with people. I enjoy sharing. One of the things that I don't ever do is I don't keep anything a secret. If somebody asks me how I make something, I tell them. Because I want to share. I want people to be able to make. These are high-tech. To me, these guys are high-tech geniuses. I'm low-tech. I'm low-tech. I'm toilet paper tubes and a glue gun. Right? So they're just, that's what it is. $7 over at Lowe's. And then buy a bunch of glue sticks and go to town. You can make all kinds of things. And again, it's all about my imagination. My imagination is grown.
Did you think you could ever have done something like that when you first started?
No.
Yeah.
No, if you'd have asked me a year ago, I probably would have shied away from something like that. A lot of this took math. I'm not a mathematician. things didn't go together right at first. I was like, what is this? Should be easy to make a pyramid. There's 4 sides.
He sent me a picture. He had told me an hour prior. He goes, I'm leaving your house. I'm going to go pick up the stuff. He went by the dollar store to pick up some of the poster board. He goes home. He goes, I already know how I'm going to do it. Do. Next thing you know, he goes, sends me a picture. And I said, oh, that turned out well. And he goes, there's only 3 sides. And that wasn't right.
Didn't work. So, and I built just a tiny little model. And from that tiny little model, I worked off of that. That's also part of the growth is I've accepted I can fail. I have accepted that I am not perfect. As much as I want to be, I want to do everything right the first time. I don't want to spend hours and hours making the same thing over and over. But that to me is a personal growth that I don't think I could have ever gotten any other way. I accept who I am and accept what I can do and what my shortcomings are. And the more words of Dirty Harry is a man's got to know his limitations. Those tentacles are what I called him. Because there was no way I was doing that with a glue gun. I could have.
But for me, I mean, I shied away from making characters or actually giving myself a character name, and then I went the complete opposite. I don't have as many as he does, but it helped me. It helped me to actually design the outfit or to make some of those outfits around that. I also refused to work with leather because it was so expensive. Even after seeing him do some stuff, he's bad because he goes, yeah, you just do this and this and this and this. And then I go home and I do this and this and this, and
But he skips this.
and I don't get the other part of that. So, but he and I were just talking about that on the way here. Is that I get something in my head that I want to build, and then it stays there. I can't let it go, and I decide I want to build it, and it becomes something that's stuck back into a maker space in the back of my head somewhere. And eventually they'll come out. Sometimes they merge together, and some of these characters come from those that are back here. But eventually, I mean, I made these, and I ended up getting these from another friend of ours because they saw I had resin bolts on there, and they got me these, and it was too heavy. But my skills that I had developed over time, I ended up taking the piece that's underneath here that is really heavy, and I casted and made molded and casted the ones that are underneath here, and just made them out of resin, which cut down the weight considerably, and then just painted them a similar color. Nobody would ever know unless I say that. And I'm like he is. When we first got into this, I said I'm going to tell people that experience with Steampunker, that they were like, no, we're not going to say how we do anything. We learned that lesson both pretty much the same time period, and I share how I make everything, and I love doing that because I see other people come back to me. And for me, that's a big, huge growth for me is that I have now come full circle and got to sit on a panel with two of the people that Thomas Williford was one of them, and a friend of ours named John Strangeway, which does a steampunk overfed, and came full circle a few years ago and got to sit on a panel with him that they invited me on, and I started grinning halfway through the panel, and they go, what are you grinning about? I said, I cannot believe I'm sitting here, because 2 years ago I was sitting out there where they were, and for me that's the biggest fun thing for me.
Growth. Well, I've been doing this
You're shrinking
a
now.
lot longer. So I think that from my perspective, the growth with the steampunk stuff was really in community outreach. In order to do that first event in Bisbee that we pulled off, I actually went door to door down the streets of Bisbee, meeting all the merchants and talking to the city council and the boards and all that nonsense. And that was stuff that I had never had to do before. In fact, one of the reasons I was a few minutes late is because we were over down at the Gatson planning an event for the Gatson. So, that reaching out to the community is kind of new for me. and steampunk is driven.
So you had a question about what was it?
These two big characters, you actually wear
Yes.
those?
Yeah, so like they said, I built the diving bell and then I had to go from there and build different outfits. So I built the wolf, which was a huge failed experiment. It's like a quad suit, which Pete helped me bring to front. So I walked around a con like this for probably about 5 hours. Back was killing me. And that's when I couldn't see straight.
And you would think we would learn from each other's mistakes, right? But my honey, 2 years later, after he does the wolf fiasco, goes to Phoenix Comic Con as a strider from Dark Crystal. Also bent over
And I told her,
on 4
don't do
stilts
it. Don't do it.
in 105-degree temperatures, walking from the hotel to the con, 2 blocks through Phoenix East.
Yeah, because God forbid anybody sees you outside of costume.
Correct.
So you walk from the hotel to there. But I learned over time. So I had put when I first built the the General Robot's head is in the back. But when I first built that, I put strainers that go in your safe that have a lot of holes in it, and I could get enough air into that. And it was a completely different outfit, and I had metal arms and those big boots I was telling you about. But when I switched those out, because everybody said I looked like an ant, I had these spiral things coming off. I didn't like that.
And he had grills for his eyes,
Yes.
that bulged outwards.
So I said, I need to change that. So I changed it out and I put these eyes on there, which are a pair of goggles. And then I had made a top hat, which this is nothing but cardboard paper. And the rivets are snow peas, split peas. Actual split piece for split piece soup that you buy at 96 cents at the grocery store.
We got that from some other steampunker, and it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and it's actually an old Disney trick. He used to use it on his model maybe. So, but I ended up switching out the eyes and couldn't breathe. And we were at the actual Ethora event, and somebody decided to do a conga line that I was at the end of, and halfway through I sat down in a chair, and next thing I know I was remembering my wife's waking me up. I don't know if I had passed out or not, but she says, you need to put a fan in there. So, and I had to learn the lesson because prior to that I built the diving bell, which didn't have fans in it. She had to open up the door because I wanted it to be correct to the model. So from then on I tried to learn lessons. So I built the different costumes that I have. Mostly this is made out of, thank you, Jim. It is upholstery foam that all the computer pieces and stuff that we get, I was collecting and taking home. Like I was saying, him and I looked at stuff, I'd take it home, put it in a closet, I'm like, I'm gonna use that. And I went on a bunch of sites and found them. Goodwill shirt, extra large. A friend of ours made me the hat, and she had this material laying around. She said, I don't have any idea what I'll use this material for. And I went, oh my gosh, that'd make an awesome pair of pants. And so she made me the pants, but it's foam throughout and extremely hot. And I wore it to Phoenix Comic Convention, and it's sweltering.
I just want to point out something. Notice who's the smallest of us? Who wears the largest outfits?
But I put a fan in the head, and from that I realized that's too hot, and it's insulating. I know if there's ever any kind of a global phenomenon that makes this earth freezing cold again, I know how to stay warm. All the materials to use. But a lot of the stuff that I make is out of EVA foam, which is your exercise foam. So from that and from the other wolf, I realized that I wasn't doing the right thing, and so my wife and daughter and son fell asleep in the back of the van on the way home from Phoenix Comic Con after making this, and I had just told my wife minutes before she fell asleep that I think I'm going to take time off and just build towards General Robot from now on. And in between there, I had already built battle armor. So now we're on our way back, and I said, I'm going to build, after she fell asleep, I said, I'm going to build a Yeti, a steampunk Yeti. And she woke up, and I was like, how many make? She said, you said you were going to take time off. But what I did in that versus something like that is that I made all the extra pieces I had of the EVA foam, I made like a cage. Because there was a site that Adam Savage said he built his, the young kids probably know what Totoro, am I saying it right? Totoro. He made a giant Totoro and he made the cage out of the corset metal straps. And he could afford that, I couldn't. Yes, that's it. And I ended up making it just out of EVA foam and covered it in fur. And then my wife and I, mostly my wife, sewed the outfit and put that on there. And coolest costume I've ever worn until the fans go out. But there's a lot of insulation, a lot of moving air, but it also stores air when the fans go off. But I've got 2 fans in the back to pull it out. I got a fan in the headpiece. There's 2 fans behind the pyramids on his side that go and pull air all the way in, and then there's 2 more in the bottom loops that pull air in and keep it circulating throughout there. So it worked great, and actually went with Jeff. His daughter was graduating senior year, and they were doing a Comic-Con event. Was the theme for the convention, right?
It was
grad night.
Project graduation. Yeah,
Project graduation, and they had asked us to come down there, and I wore that. I was dancing in it, sitting down in it, walking around. It was all great until the fan went out in the head. But yes, I make larger costumes. That was the latest one, and I got to wear that in the parade with Pete, another friend of ours, as Krampus. Not as traditional. Mine is not as traditional, but then again,
Still scare children. So
yes.
good. All right, so I know we've kind of been talking for quite some time, but we just want to like break and like
Yeah, sure.
let people lay hands on things. Come on in.
Come on.
Come on
Ask
up,
questions.
look at our stuff, ask us, you guys can meet us and
I
ask
said
any
I'm
questions.
someone stand lined up.
So that way you don't have to sit
Yeah,
there.
I mean, you know, it is electronic, so but in many cases, these are pre-made, like, so it's just a backup camera, right? And all I did was wire the backup camera, and I 3D printed, so that's the backup camera right there, see it? So if you wave your hand over it, you'll see, it lights up like if you look over.
Strange. A lower level. You seen that movie? Type unit. Yeah. So he does his magic tricks.
So this Tropicana,
this is essentially a game backpack.
you know, the lid for Tropicana plastic, and I just shuffled on
So I see
there.
the design. We've done it's segments. So I cut the segments on a table saw, and there's actually 2 segments.
You did answer many
But
questions.
all of us are very obviously you're gonna be here, but you want to ask questions, where you can get in contact with us, or any of the places that are already.